Wander Wealthy Podcast, episode 266. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Wander Wealthy Podcast. I have missed you. At least I have missed you. I don't know if you've missed me. You've been still hearing my voice every single week, but I haven't been producing new episodes for quite some time because we have finally just wrapped up 13 weeks straight of the Spring Break Money Coach School, where I shared with you some of the most listened to and highly rated podcast episodes from the Wander Wealthy podcast. And I put them in a specific order to help you really learn and go through the process of becoming a money coach and building your money coaching business. And so I kind of turned it into a school. If you haven't caught that, you can totally binge listen to it. The last 13 episodes that you'll see, they all start with Spring Break Money Coach School, and they don't really have episode numbers other than the episode numbers of the replay episode that we're referring to. So go check that out. And I am so excited to be back here with you today, podcasting, sharing some new things. And we're going to be doing this for the next couple of months until the baby comes into this world. And then I will be going on maternity leave and for quite some time. And so the podcast will be on pause for a handful of months. But not to fear, there's still so many juicy episodes to come over the next couple months and so many good episodes to go back to. Since basically episode, I think 160, maybe it was 140 when I really made the shift to helping money coaches specifically. So you can obviously go back even beyond that, but if you really want some good, juicy, helpful tips and tricks and stories for your earballs and your personal situation of becoming a money coach, then there's tons out there. So go dig in. Today, I wanted to share with you how to start a podcast for your money coaching business. This is something that I get questions about quite frequently. I have a lot of clients who obviously come to me through the podcast and they see a podcast in their future. And before, we really dig into starting a podcast, I really want to make sure that when they work with me one-on-one, we really help them understand, what is their special power? What is their unique position in this market? What is their niche? Who are they helping? What problem are they solving? And how can we build a key signature program to offer from that? So that takes a bulk of our time when I work with my clients through the blueprint. But for some of my clients who I continue to work with, sometimes we do get to dabble into creating longer form content. If you've been around the Wander Wealthy podcast for a while, you know that I'm a big fan of leveraging what is already getting traction out there. And a lot of times that's leveraging social media in shorter form content. But a lot of people want to own their own content, as do I. And also being able to just create content in a longer format is really nice to develop a deeper intimacy with your raving fans, because you'll find that when you build your social media, whether you're on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook, you have a relationship with your audience, but it is in the form of that shorter form content. That's what they like. They like to consume that. But there's going to be a subset of those people who are going to want more from you. And you can leverage and utilize the tools on one of those platforms. I know that there's still live video, which you can then record, longer form pieces of content and actually, be able to interact with your clients or potential clients and your audience members in a much more intimate way and potentially live, right? In a live setting. But a lot of people are still craving to have their own kind of longer form content that they can pre-create, pre-record, pre-write, and then put it out there for their audience and especially their raving fans to really dig into, kind of sink their teeth into. And I really see it as a great way to develop your relationship on a deeper level with these potential clients and these individuals. Not to mention that, for me, my podcast here, the Wander Wealthy podcast, I'm able to develop a more intimate relationship with each of you because you're sitting here spending your time listening to me. And I have, I know a lot of my podcast listeners, which I absolutely love and adore. Thank you for reaching out and letting me know you tune in. If you haven't yet, just head over to Instagram. I don't post right now, but I am still checking in. And a message from you is always so well received. I love it. But, I feel like I have a connection with my podcast listeners, a much deeper connection than even some of, the larger number of people who are following me on social media. And so that's what I really love about the podcast. But in addition to that, I also know that many of you are former clients as well. And so it's a great way for us to kind of stay connected, even if we're not continuing to work together, for us to stay connected, for you to continue to learn, get inspiration, whatever it is that you come here for, and for me to maintain that connection with you too. So I think a podcast or, a long form kind of written blog, even creating more longer form videos, utilizing most likely you're going to utilize YouTube to do that, can be a great way to just extend that relationship with your audience. So with that said, that's kind of a long disclaimer. Is it a disclaimer? Not really. It's more informational, but a little bit of a disclaimer, I guess, on my end is for many, many episodes, you've heard me say, don't get so wrapped up, don't get too caught up in starting a podcast right away, starting a blog right away. Do what's already there and present for you. Do and leverage what you already have traction with, or that is already so easy for you to go create that connection with your ideal clients, which is truly using social media, because they're on there and you are on there, and you can seek them out just as much as they can seek you out. When you transition into longer form content, you have to be sought out. The people have to come find you, whether that's through keyword research, through finding you on Pinterest, or, potentially stumbling upon your social media profile that might be promoting your podcast. But although you could then go seek out your clients and then throw your podcast in their face, which is totally fine and acceptable. It's not always so aggressive, but that takes an extra step for them to initiate to get to your podcast eventually. So that's why social media is so great, because it takes all those extra steps away and we're able to connect right on that platform. But again, like I've been saying, some of us crave and want that format and that longer form piece of content to create that deeper connection. So that's where a podcast can come in. I'm going to walk you through the details of starting a podcast because I have a podcast and I am, starting to think about maybe blogging while I'm on maternity leave. I'm not sure if I'm going to be blogging about business or just more kind of life in general, expat life especially, some of the just thoughts that I've had about pregnancy and living abroad and being an American outside of America and marrying an Italian and getting citizenship and all the big changes that I've been going through and experiencing, and maybe sharing some tips and tricks, or just, I don't know, just a kind of like an online journal. Anyway, I'm thinking about doing something like that, but we'll see. We'll see. It's not really business related at all, but we'll see. But you can definitely tune into this episode if you're not even thinking about podcasting, and maybe you're thinking or considering blogging or creating YouTube videos, and really use the same kind of tips and tricks. I'm going to get also into the logistics of what you have to do, what you specifically need, the tools, the kind of process you need to go through to actually create and publish a podcast. So that won't necessarily apply, but I think the overall premise and what I'll start with, okay, the number one thing that you need to have when you want to start a podcast, a blog, or a YouTube channel, any kind of long form content platform, is you really need to be focused on creating and publishing before you have it all figured out. This is the hardest thing. And this I want to start with because I hear so many people saying, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to start a podcast in 3 months. And I'm like, why don't you just start it now? Why don't you just start it today? And I know it's easier said than done, but I also know that the reason they don't feel like they can start it today isn't necessarily that they don't feel like they have the time or they don't have the ideas, but it's usually because they feel like they need all these other accessories and supplemental things that aren't actually necessary for them to just get started with podcasting. And so often people delay and wait until it's perfect or until they feel like they have the entire setup in place for them to get started. But really having the content and developing the habit of creating content and experiencing what it's like and actually experiencing the process of creating content, of sitting here talking to no one, but also talking to lots of people. But obviously you're like sitting talking to yourself when you're recording a podcast, like getting comfortable with that, experiencing that is really important. And your first episodes are never going to be your best episodes. So it's like, just get them out of the way and get started. And so that's what I really mean by you don't need to have all the other things in place before you're allowed to start podcasting. Like all you need are the very, very basic and mostly free tools to get the setup so that you can actually hit record and then just get started. Just start creating. And then you could even go through the process of publishing these episodes. It can take a long time to get all that stuff up and running anyway. So might as well kickstart it now and not delay until you really feel that you have it all figured out. I know that there's a lot of podcast professionals and coaches and consultants out there who talk about, having this big launch and launching. My personal philosophy on that is that when you're launching, especially if you don't have an audience built up already, which I think most of my clientele come to me without a big audience built up, then launching and having a big launch isn't as critical as people are going to make it seem. I think about it like this. If you're a new author and if you're Elizabeth Gilbert, then you're going to do a book launch. You're going to get everything all ready and excited because you need to hit the numbers. That's the expectation for you. But if you're just a first-time author and you're self-publishing and you just want to get your book out there, it's so much better for you to not stress about the launch and delay getting the book out there so that you can prepare for this big, grand kind of festivity that ends up being more stressful than maybe even producing the numbers you were thinking it would produce. So I'd rather have you get it out there, start helping the few lives that it's going to change. And then maybe you can have a hard launch. Maybe you can soft launch. This has been really viral lately, soft launching boyfriends or hard launching boyfriends. You can soft launch your podcast, just slowly sprinkle it out there and then eventually have a real official hard launch later on. And again, I think that is so much better for our own personal momentum and confidence that okay, I can do this. I've already been doing this. And now I'm going to stand on that mountaintop and shout across the valley about how awesome my podcast is and be it's officially out there, but you'll see that there's 10 episodes there for you to binge. And, people love that too. So why not? Why not get everything set up before you really need to worry about it? I think other people worry about the algorithm, but I really think Apple Podcasts and Spotify and whatnot, of course they do have feeds that you can get into these top new and noteworthy, but I think people are spending less time on that than you may think, and more so people are searching. They're using keywords to find podcasts that are applicable to them. So that's how most people find my podcast, who are my ideal clients, is they're really using the keywords and literally just searching in Spotify and then stumbling upon my podcast, or searching in Pinterest, or searching on Google. So, it's good to be on new and noteworthy, which I'm not even positive if Apple Podcasts still has that section. I'm sure they do. And that's good, but it's it's far more good for the ego than I think it is for the actual numbers of listeners that you'll receive for your show. So, I think you can get on New and Noteworthy even like weeks or months after you actually launch your podcast. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. And that is why I'm very passionate about the idea that you should just focus on creating and publishing before having it all figured out. Okay. So the second thing is to determine your upload schedule and start to map out your content. This is a good exercise that will help you kind of commit to how consistent do I want to be? And then how can I practice that consistency by just starting to brainstorm some pieces of content that I can fill this schedule with? I wouldn't procrastinate a plan and try to like do a full year's worth of content or even a full quarter's worth of content if that's going to keep you holding yourself back, right? Because you don't have to have a full year's worth of content planned out to be able to start recording those first episodes, right? So I'm going back to like creating and publishing is far more important than planning the full year, but you can really practice the like first step of content creation, which is that brainstorming, knowing what your schedule is, and then starting to input those topics and those ideas. And then obviously you'll expand off of those when you go into creating the notes for your episode, or if you're doing interviews, obviously reaching out to people to schedule those interviews and sending them the outline for the interview if you want to even do that. And then ultimately getting the episode recorded. But sitting down and even mapping out like a month's worth of content or 2 to 3 months worth of content if you're not going to upload every week is such a good just skill to develop, because you're going to be then needing to do that month in and month out, depending on how you choose to produce your show. You might want to instead do seasons where maybe you do a series of like 12 episodes and then you take a break. Be careful with that, because a lot of people will do seasons and then just completely fall off and never produce a second or maybe a third season. And that's heartbreaking for me as a listener and a fan. I find that for me, the consistency really comes in by just producing a regular episode on a regular basis. And that doesn't necessarily mean weekly. It could definitely be bi-weekly or even monthly. That can be a really good pace for many people, but just determine what your schedule will be and then commit to sticking to it. And the way that you can commit to sticking to it is at least mapping out 4 to 5 episodes in advance. And then with just the topic ideas, you don't even have to have them outlined or fully recorded yet. Just get that mapped out. The next thing to focus on, so number 3, is to stick to your niche audience and your niche topic. This is really important in any kind of content creation. You really want to make sure that you have some content pillars mapped out. Content pillars can then represent the overarching topics you're going to be speaking about throughout your podcast. That way you have a little bit of variety and structure for each of the episodes, and overall like how your content looks when you zoom out and look at the content, that you maybe produce throughout the year. You could generally look at that content, all of it, and group it into different categories. And those are your content pillars. So for me, my content pillars are really focused on marketing your business, your money coaching business, on building a money coaching program and kind of the coaching and actual delivery of money coaching. We talk a lot about sales and how to kind of develop the confidence and also the skills around selling. And we talk a lot about the mindset and the entrepreneurial wherewithal that you have to navigate the world of having your own business, being your own business owner, and really only reporting to yourself, but also maybe dealing with clients and whatnot. So those are the general topics and I guess content pillars that we follow here at Wonder Wealthy. And that when you show up to listen, you're going to get something that falls within those categories. So it's predictable, and that's really good for your audience too, because it allows them to know exactly what they're going to get when they come to your show. And then I also said stick to your niche audience. And so you also want to make sure that whatever the content you're creating, you can tweak it to apply to that particular individual who is basically your ideal client, the person who, you most want to be working with, and who you can really curate all of the topics, the advice, the stories that you're going to share under those content pillars. You can really curate and specialize it for them so it feels relatable and relevant, and then they know you are the coach for them. So for me, right, technically, when I talk about sales, marketing, coaching, like delivering coaching and managing clients, and also the mindset of being an entrepreneur, technically that could apply to any type of online coach, right? Like for the most part, it could maybe even go even more broad and cover all online service-based business owners. But if we wanted to go a little bit narrow, like any online coach, that could technically apply to. What I do then, though, is I narrow it further by speaking specifically to money coaches. And I use examples of money coaching clients, or, the typical objections you hear when it comes to money coaching that maybe you don't hear when it comes to business coaching or life coaching or fitness coaching. And so that's what really helps curate and frame who this podcast is for. That way, when you show up, you're in the right place because I'm talking about you. I'm using examples that you might already have experienced in your life. I'm answering those specific questions that you have as it relates to you. So you really want to think about that when you're creating your show. And maybe you have the various topics of saving money and investing and paying off debt and budgeting. Let's just say those are your content pillars. But what if you could take it that step further? And an example I love to use is like single moms, right? Let's say that's your ideal client. They're going to experience saving, investing, paying off debt, and budgeting in a way different light than just a single person with no kids or a married couple with kids, right? Dual income. So it's really great to be able to take that and personalize it and curate it for them specifically, because then they know when they show up, what you're providing is specific to them. So you are their person. And that makes them feel even more connected to you. And then eventually, like when you do also, and you absolutely should use your podcast to sell your services, your offerings, your signature coaching program, they're going to know, okay, this is the person I want to work with because they get me and they create content for me. And yeah, it just all makes sense. So speaking of selling, right, I'm going to take this opportunity for myself to say that the Client Attraction Content Matrix is a program I created to really help you think through not only like your niche audience and your niche topics, but then, really dive into what do those content pillars represent? And then how can we make sure we're creating a variety of content within each of those content pillars that is relevant and specially curated for my ideal clients. So I take you through the full exercise. I really help you understand the buyer's journey of a potential client and where they might fall and how they experience, tuning into your content and then eventually wanting to buy from you. And I cover all of that in a very easily accessible online program called the Client Attraction Content Matrix. And what you also get is my signature tool that kind of takes the mathematical strategic aspect of this and pulls it into a really easy to use tool that helps you generate tons of content ideas. And then there's also a calendar that you can obviously use as a content calendar to map out all of those content ideas across the schedule that you would like to produce content at. And a lot of people use it for social media, but guess what? You can also use this for your podcast or for any other long form content platform that you want to be on and create content on. But obviously, since we're talking podcasts here, you can do that. I use my content matrix that I use in my business. I use it for my podcast all the time. I go and get ideas from there for what I want to talk about on the weekly episode. And then I'm able to take that and put it into my content calendar and then expand on those ideas as I need to before I sit down and record. So if you want to get your hands on the program as well as the tools of the content matrix, head to wonderwealthy.com/content. You can get your hands on it and go through it in as little as a weekend to go through the material and then set yourself up with like 6 months to a year's worth of content, if that. It could be even more depending on your posting schedule. So wonderwealthy.com/content. Okay, the next top tip, I guess, or step that you would ultimately take is and this is more of a hot tip. So we've already gone through 3 steps. First is like to just have the mindset of creating and publishing before having it all figured out. Second is to determine your upload schedule and start to map out some of your content. Third is to make sure that that content is sticking to your niche audience and your niche topics, like your content pillars that you'll develop when you join the content matrix. This is, I guess we'll call it step 3B. Like it's a sub-step of step 3. And that is to title your shows accordingly. So when you sit down to title your podcast episodes, title them. This is where search engine optimization comes in, which can feel like a huge bear to learn and understand. And there's a ton of information out there about it. But in the simplest format, like you just want to title your shows what your ideal clients might be searching for in the search engine. And it's beneficial to get as specific as possible because then you're able to stand out for those individuals. So as an example, this episode is called How to Start a Podcast for Your Money Coaching Business. My keywords, obviously, is start a podcast is like a long tail keyword. It's not one word, so it's a phrase that people type in. But if I just called this episode How to Start a Podcast, that would be so broad. And so many people have probably written and podcasted about this very topic, it would get lost out in the world. And so by taking it an extra step and calling out my ideal clients or, a topic my ideal clients are, that is top of mind, that they're concerned with or that applies to them, I'm able to make my search engine optimization for my podcast even stronger. So that if someone searches like start a podcast, money coaching business or coaching business or any kind of variety, they can even type in like financial coaching, but because financial coaching and money coaching are so related, like computers and the internet are amazing and know that, this podcast is far more likely to pop up because it is so specific around that. So How to Start a Podcast for Your Money Coaching Business just takes it that extra step further. And if my ideal clients are looking for something that's more specific to them, then that's what's going to pop up for them and kind of show at the top of their feed wherever they end up searching for it. So title your shows accordingly and don't be afraid to, you want to keep them short enough that like they can read them. But if you need to take it those extra couple words to be able to say like for single moms or when you're mothering solo or whatever kind of way that your ideal clients might say it and kind of refer to themselves and their situations, add that extra layer. Be willing to go there because that is going to, that's why I always say like niching is so important. And a lot of people are afraid to niche because they think, oh, but then I'm going to pigeonhole myself and there's not as many people. But when you try to be too generic, right, with how to start a podcast, you get lost in the weeds. There's so many other people talking about that. When you choose to go specific, the right people find you. So be willing to go there. I always challenge my clients to do that. Okay. So those are like the three things that you basically need to do to get started. The fourth one is actually just a reminder of don't overwhelm yourself with all the additional things that you could do, because yes, eventually you might want to set up a website for your podcast and create blog posts for each podcast episode to like host the show notes. Maybe you want to have a Pinterest strategy and start pinning and uploading your podcast pins for the blog posts that host the show notes to Pinterest so people can find you that way. You want to find other ways to promote yourself on social media. All of that is good, but first things first, you need to have content to promote. You need to have the content. So sit down, determine that posting schedule, map out the content, but not very far in advance. Just like map out a handful of episodes that you could sit down and record now. The next step would be, okay, let's title it accordingly. Let's think about how we can take it that extra step to personalize it for my ideal clients. And now let's create that outline and then let's hit record and let's get it created and let's get it published. All right. So that's the most important stuff for you today. I'm going to take a few minutes to go into the specifics around like what actually you need to get your podcast going. Hopefully it'll only take me like 5 minutes to go through this, and I'll give you some resources that you can look up as well that will help you with some of these questions, because some of the things aren't as straightforward as we would like them to be. So everything leading up to this point was like super valid for anyone creating long form content, be it a podcast, a blog, a YouTube channel. But now we're going to get into the nitty gritty of actually podcasting. Okay. So first of all, what do you need? Well, you need a way to record your voice, and that comes in the form of some sort of software that can obviously take in the audio and keep it recorded and saved. And then also a microphone, right, to pick up your voice. Now, you don't need to go fancy schmancy and get an expensive microphone. You could even I wouldn't use Bluetooth headphones because they can sometimes just not pick up the right sound or be hard or muffled. And it really just depends on the quality of your headphones. But if you do have like the plug-in headphones with a microphone on it, those can work really well. It's not going to be like the top tier sound quality, but they can work really well just to get you started. And remember, like the point is getting comfortable and used to the process of podcasting and knowing no matter what, your first couple episodes are not going to be your favorite anyway. So just getting them out there and getting them started. You can find an affordable USB microphone. The one that I use is, let me check it, Audio Technica USB mic. It's, I think like around $100, maybe a little under $100 on Amazon. It's really great, plugs in via USB port. And it comes with a little stand that you can just set up on your desk, and like that is plenty. Oftentimes I'll even hold it. Right now I have like a really fancy schmancy podcasting arm stand that I use. But that's like next level stuff. For now, again, you just need to get started. If you're doing an interview style podcast, you might want to have access to Zoom. I used to use Skype back in the day before Zoom was cool. But Zoom now, everyone knows how to use it. Just make sure the mics are appropriately set up in the settings. You have like the right mic connected, and don't forget to hit record. You can just record and use the audio files. It'll record the audio file on your end as well as your interviewee's end. And then you can take it into an editing software to edit it if you need to edit it down. Speaking of editing software, this would be the same if you're doing solo episodes like I do, where you just record yourself, or you want to edit your interview episodes. You're going to need a software that can record and also edit your audio files. And so I use Audacity, Audacity. It is a free software that you can download online, both for Macs and PCs. It's pretty user-friendly, and there's tons of YouTube tutorials that you can look up for how to use it. But I use mostly the basic functions. I've become a little bit more, I don't even want to say an expert, but become a little bit more advanced at using various editing functions. But at the end of the day, again, the point is to get the content out there and not for it to be perfect. So play around with it, get started, record your first show, see how it goes, and then learn from the experience versus waiting to learn everything before you allow yourself to start. So Audacity is the tool that I use. It's free. I use it to record. I'm recording on it right now. And then if I need to go edit, I will edit the episode there. And you can pull in music files. You can pull in, obviously, interview clips. You can pull in other audio material to insert into your podcast so that you can, fully develop the full show right there. Then you just export it as an MP3 file and upload it to your media host, which we'll talk about in a moment. But let's see. So in terms of how to record, you need that software. So for me, it's Audacity. Or if you're doing an interview, you use Zoom to actually record the interview. And then you would pull that into Audacity to edit. And then you obviously need a microphone. And oftentimes, especially if you're doing an interview, you definitely want some headphones so that your microphone doesn't pick up the feedback of the interviewees speaking back to you. So those are the things that you actually physically need. And then, like I said, editing software. So once it's recorded, then you go into editing. And again, it's the same software that you would record on if you're doing solo shows, and use those YouTube tutorials because they are a godsend. The next thing is I'm just like stating, record your first 3 episodes, get some episodes recorded, because in terms of the process of getting your podcast up on, especially Apple Podcasts, they like to see a couple episodes in the bank, and then, they publish, and they have this weird timeline, and it's a little frustrating. But again, I have a resource that I can toss your way so that you can use that. Some people like to do intro, outro music, and what you really want to do is make sure you're finding copyright-free music online. So just do some research online for copyright-free music. In some cases, you might have to buy like a license to use a certain piece of music. Even like, you're not going to get a Beyonce song. You're going to get some song that someone created, but you still have to pay for the license to use it. Otherwise, you might be able to find, again, copyright-free music. If all else fails, skip the music and figure out how to do and add that later. It's not going to be the end of the world, and you can be just as entertaining without music on your show. If you know someone who can make you a quick track, or you can do it yourself, you could always opt for that, because then usually that's naturally copyright-free because the person made it specifically for you, or you made it for yourself. The next thing that you're going to need is a hosting platform. So what's funny about podcasting is, in order for people around the world to listen to it, the data of this audio file needs to be hosted somewhere. And if you tried to just put it up on your own website, your website eventually would get so full of this data that it would just slow down and operate really poorly. So don't make that mistake. Instead, you use a media host. There's lots of different podcasting media hosts. The one that I use, and the one that I know most people I know use, is Libsyn, Libsyn. And what I love about Libsyn is it's really affordable. So you can really get started with very little, especially if you're not creating long or many podcasts per month. And they have some really, really good tutorials and a help center that walks you through like how to do everything. So I'm just a big fan of Libsyn because they are awesome. You can use my code Tess. It gets you some percent off. I should probably check what that is. Let's see. With the code Tess, you get the rest of the current month and the entire next month free. We love free things. So if you wanted to use my code, you absolutely can. And Libsyn is great because the next thing that you need to do is have a podcast graphic in order to then get your podcast set up on Apple Podcasts and other podcasting mediums. So the podcast graphic is something that you can create easily using Canva or Photoshop, but iTunes/Apple Podcasts has a very specific criteria. Luckily, Libsyn has a great article that can help you understand what specifically you need to do for your podcast graphic. So just go to Libsyn's Help Center and check out their stuff. The next step, like I said, is getting your podcast up on Apple Podcasts. Apple Podcasts is like the most tricky, but then there's like Spotify and Google Podcasts. There's all these different basically broadcasters or apps that people download and use to listen to podcasts. And your media host will basically send your podcast feed out to these apps for you. But you need to get it started initially, at least with Apple Podcasts. There's like this whole rigmarole that you need to do. And again, Libsyn's Help Center has really, really helpful, great articles and step-by-step processes that you can go through. So even if you're not using Libsyn, but you need some help on getting your podcast up and running, specifically on Apple Podcasts, you can go to help.libsynsupport.com and get the help that you need. I used to know the whole process, but it's been so long since I've done it myself that my advice is probably outdated. So I'd rather just defer to the people whose job it is to help people do this all the time. So Libsyn's great, but again, there's plenty of other podcast platforms out there that you can try as well. But once your podcast is up and running, then it's like every time you sit down to record an episode, all you have to do is upload that MP3 file to your media host. So in this case, if you're using Libsyn, you would upload it to Libsyn. You would add the title, you can add the description of the episode, and then you hit publish, and then it automatically gets pushed out. So podcasting is awesome in that way because especially if like writing, you get a little bit blocked up, but you're much better at just kind of rambling like me, then podcasting can be a great solution. So that is it. That's what I wanted to share with you today. That's the whole step-by-step process. I know it can be easier said than done, but also I want you to remember that like you don't need all of these things figured out before you're allowed to start. That's what keeps most people stuck is they like wait until they're ready, and their version of ready means like knowing exactly what needs to happen before they're allowed to even sit down and decide if they even like podcasting. So rip off the Band-Aid, just start recording yourself, get comfortable with the process, and then worry about polishing it later. My favorite saying is you can't edit a blank page, and a lot of times we're trying to edit things that we haven't even written down yet. So instead, like, be willing to fail fast and learn from the experience of doing it, and you're just going to get better and better. So I hope you liked this episode. Don't forget you can utilize the content matrix to really help with your content creation, be it social media or longer form like podcasting. Head to wanderwealthy.com/content. And thank you so much for tuning in with me today. To catch the show notes of this week's episode, head to wanderwealthypodcast.com. Until next time, I hope you wander wealthy.